In the Tudor court, a rotting, charcoal black smile wasn't a sign of poor hygiene, was the ultimate flex. While we spend thousands to whiten our teeth today, Queen Elizabeth's decaying mouth started a trend where noblewomen used soot to fake tooth rot. Discover why turning your teeth pitch black was the only way to prove you were truly elite. The sugar paradox, why sweetness meant suffering. You think sugar is just a treat. In Tudor England, it was a weapon, a status symbol, a death sentence in disguise. Back then, sugar wasn't something you sprinkled on your porridge. It was imported from across the world, taxed like gold, and sold for prices that would make your jaw drop. A single pound of sugar could cost the equivalent of 5,000 today, and if you could afford it, you flaunted it. Because in the Tudor court, consuming sugar wasn't about taste, it was about power. And here's the twisted irony. The more sugar you ate, the faster your teeth rotted. And the faster your teeth rotted, the more it proved you were rich enough to afford it. A mouth full of blackened, decaying teeth wasn't a sign of neglect, it was a badge of honor. A rotten smile was a flex. Imagine this. You're a noblewoman at court. You sip on sugared wine, nibble on candied fruits, and feast on marzipan sculptural while your teeth slowly dissolve in your mouth. Every cavity, every blackened tooth was proof that you could afford the sweetest, most expensive luxury in Europe. And if you weren't eating enough sugar to rot your teeth naturally, no problem. You just fake it. Because in Tudor England, pain was proof of privilege. And if your teeth were falling out by age 30, well, that just meant you'd lived well. The Queen's smile. How Elizabeth's rotten teeth set the trend. If you wanted to fit in at the Tudor court, you didn't just need the right clothes or the right manners. You needed the right teeth. Or, more accurately, the wrong ones. Queen Elizabeth's smile was legendary. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was horrifying. Her teeth were blackened, decayed, and in some cases, missing entirely. And yet, no one dared to laugh. Because if the Queen's teeth were a mess, then a mess was what you wanted. Elizabeth's love of sugar was no secret. She had a notorious sweet tooth, indulging in sugared almonds, candied violets, and marzipan delicacies, all of which wreaked havoc on her teeth. By the time she was in her 50s, her teeth were so decayed that foreign ambassadors noted it in their letters home. One Spanish envoy even wrote that her teeth were very bad and black as anything. And yet, no one criticized her. Because in Tudor England, a queen's rotten teeth weren't a flaw. They were a statement, a declaration of wealth, a symbol of power. If the most powerful woman in the land had a mouth full of decay, then decay was what you aspired to. So what did the noblewomen of the court do? They followed suit. If they couldn't naturally rot their teeth fast enough because, let's face it, not everyone could afford that much sugar, they faked it. And that's where things got really dark. The soot solution. Faking decay to fit in. You think blackening your teeth sounds extreme. It was. But in Tudor England, it was necessary. Because here's the thing. Not everyone could afford to eat enough sugar to rot their teeth naturally. And if you showed up at court with a set of pearly whites, people would assume you were poor. Or worse, that you were cheap. So what was a noblewoman to do? She cheated. And the cheat of choice? Soot. That's right, soot. The same stuff that coated the inside of chimneys was rubbed onto teeth to give them that coveted blackened look. Some women used charcoal. Others mixed up pastes of burnt sugar and ash. A few even dipped their teeth in ink for a quick fix before a big event. And it wasn't just soot. There were recipes. Some noblewomen concocted special pastes made from crushed eggshells, honey, and even powdered gemsol designed to stain teeth black while, theoretically, strengthening them. Well, it didn't work. But why go through all this trouble? Because in Tudor England, your teeth weren't just part of your body. They were part of your identity. And if your identity didn't include a mouth full of decay, then you weren't anybody. And the worst part? It worked. A woman with soot-blackened teeth was instantly recognized as someone of means. Someone who could afford the finest luxuries. Someone who belonged at court. So the next time you brush your teeth, remember, there was a time when the ultimate flex wasn't a white smile, it was a black one. And if you wanted to prove you were elite, you had to be willing to rot for it. The cost of a black smile. Sugar as a status symbol. You think diamonds are the ultimate status symbol. In Tudor England, sugar was. And it wasn't just expensive. It was lethal. A single pound of sugar in the 16th century could cost as much as a small farm. That's right, a farm. Not a cow, not a chicken, a whole farm. And if you could afford to waste it on your teeth, you were somebody. Sugar wasn't just sweet, it was exotic. It came from far-off lands like Italy, Spain, and later the New World. It was imported, taxed and hoarded like treasure. And just like treasure, it was flaunted. Nobles would display sugar sculptures at banquets, serve sugared wines, and nibble on candied fruit saw while their teeth slowly turned to mush. And here's the real kicker. The more sugar you ate, the more your teeth rotted. And the more your teeth rotted, the more it proved you could afford it. It was a vicious cycle of wealth and decay. A black smile was a receipt for a life of luxury. But sugar wasn't just eaten, it was worn. Some noblewomen carried small boxes of sugar with them, nibbling on it throughout the day like a modern-day influencer with a designer handbag. And if you didn't have sugar on you at all times, you were nobody. And the ultimate flex, serving sugar at your table. If you could afford to waste sugar on your guests, you were truly elite. Because in Tudor England, sugar wasn't just a treat, it was a currency. And if you could afford to rot your teeth with it, you were rich beyond measure. The dental reality. Pain, infections, and missing teeth. You think a toothache is bad now? In Tudor England, it was a death sentence. Because here's the thing. There was no dental care. No anesthesia. No fillings. No dentists. If you had a cavity, you suffered. And if the pain got too bad, you pulled the tooth out yourself. Or, if you were lucky, you had a barber surgeon do it for you without painkillers and the infections. Brutal. A simple cavity could turn into a raging abscess, filling your mouth with pus and agony. And if the infection spread, you could die. Because in Tudor England, a toothache wasn't just a nuisance. It was a life or death situation. And let's not forget the smell. A mouth full of rotting teeth didn't just look. It smelled like a sewer. And yet, no one complained. Because in Tudor England, bad breath was the price of prestige. And what about missing teeth? No problem. Some noblewomen embraced the gaps, seeing them as proof of a life well lived. Others tried rudimentary dentures made from ivory, bone, or even wood. But these false teeth were uncomfortable, unstable, and often worse than nothing. And the worst part? There was no escape. Once your teeth started rotting, there was no going back. And if you lost them all, well, at least you died rich. The court's obsession. Why everyone followed the Queen. You think peer pressure is bad now? In Tudor England, it was a matter of survival. Because here's the thing. If the Queen did it, everyone did it. And if Queen Elizabeth I had blackened, rotting teeth, then every noblewoman at court wanted them too. It wasn't just about fitting in. It was about surviving. Because in the Tudor court, standing out was dangerous. And if you didn't have blackened teeth, people would assume you were poor, or worse, that you were a nobody. And the gossip. Devastating. If you showed up at court with white teeth, the whispers would start. She can't afford sugar. She's not one of us. She's a peasant in disguise. And in Tudor England, being called a peasant was the ultimate insult. And the portraits. They lied. Artists would soften the blow, painting noblewomen with closed lips or subtle shadows to hide their rotting teeth. But the truth was there, and everyone knew it. And the worst part? No one could escape it. Even if you hated the trend, you had to follow it. Because in Tudor England, your teeth weren't just part of your body. They were part of your identity. And if your identity didn't include a mouthful of decay, then you didn't belong. So the next time you smile, remember, there was a time when the ultimate flex wasn't a white smile, it was a black one. And if you wanted to fit in at court, you had to be willing to rot for it. The fake versus the real who could afford to rot, naturally. You think all blackened teeth were equal in Tudor England? Far from it. There was a hierarchy of decay, and not all rot was created equal. At the top of the pyramid were the true sugar addicts, the wealthiest nobles who could afford to eat enough sweets to let their teeth rot naturally. Their blackened smiles were earned through gluttony, a badge of honor that proved they could indulge without restraint. If your teeth were naturally decayed, you were elite among the elite. But what if you couldn't afford to eat that much sugar? What if your teeth were still stubbornly white? No problem. You just faked it, and the faking industry was booming. The soot and charcoal method was the cheapest option. A quick rub with chimney soot or crushed charcoal, and instantly, your teeth looked like they'd been marinating in sugar for years. It was messy, temporary, and stank like a fireplace butt. It worked. For those who wanted something a little more sophisticated, there were sugar pastes. A mix of burnt sugar, honey, and sometimes even crushed eggshells could be applied like a stain, giving teeth a dark, decayed look that lasted a few days. Some noblewomen even slept with the paste on their teeth to deepen the effect. And then there were the true connoisseurs, the ones who wanted the real thing, but faster. They dipped their teeth in ink or chew on blackened silver to speed up the staining process. It was painful, risky, and probably toxic, but if it meant fitting in at court, it was worth it. But here's the real kicker. The fakes were easy to spot. If your teeth were too uniformly black, people knew you were cheating. The real decay was patchy, uneven, and often accompanied by missing teeth, a true sign of a life well lived and well sugared. So if you wanted to fit in, you had two choices. Eat enough sugar to rot naturally, or fake it so well that no one could tell the difference. And in Tudor England, both options were a flex. The foreign influence. How Italian and Spanish trends shaped Tudor beauty. You think the black teeth trend started in England? Think again. The Tudors stole this idea like they stole so many other things from Europe's elite. In 15th century Italy, sugar was already a status symbol. The Medici family and other Italian nobles were famous for their sweet tooth, and their decaying smiles were legendary. If you wanted to prove you were rich in Florence, you let your teeth rot in style. And then there was Spain. When Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, arrived in England, she brought her Spanish habits with her, including a love of sugar and a tolerance for blackened teeth. The English court took notice, and if the Spanish queen had a mouthful of decay, then so should the English nobility. But it wasn't just Spain and Italy. The French court had its own dental obsessions. While the Tudors were blackening their teeth, the French were whitening theirs with early toothpastes made from crushed bones and oyster shells. It didn't work very well. And the real irony? The Tudors looked down on the French for their vanity. While rotten teeth were seen as natural and noble, white teeth were considered fake and frivolous. Because in Tudor England, suffering for beauty wasn't just accepted, it was expected. So the next time you blame the Tudors for their bizarre beauty standards, remember, they didn't invent them. They just took them to the next level. The sugar trade. How a sweet tooth funded empires. You think sugar was just a treat. In Tudor England, it was an empire builder. The sugar trade was big business. And it wasn't just sweetening. Teeth, it was funding wars, building palaces, and fueling the rise of England as a global power. Sugar came from far-off lands, Italy, Spain, and later, the New World. And getting it to England was dangerous, expensive, and often deadly. Ships sank, pirates stole cargo, and fortunes were made and lost over a single shipment. And the cost? Snot and past. A single sugar loaf, a cone-shaped block of refined sugar, could cost as much as a year's wages for a servant. And if you could afford to buy it, store it, and serve it, you were somebody. But sugar wasn't just eating it was displayed. At banquets, nobles would show off sugar, sculptures, elaborate centerpieces made entirely of spun sugar. These edible artworks were meant to be admired, not eaten, a flex so extreme that even the wealthiest guests would hesitate to take a bite. And the dark side of the sugar trade was slavery. By the late 16th century, England's sugar was coming from plantations in the Caribbean, worked by enslaved Africans. The sweetness on Tudor tables was built on the backs of the suffering. So the next time you enjoy a piece of candy, remember, in Tudor England, sugar wasn't just a treat, it was a currency, a status symbol, and a blood-stained luxury. And if you could afford to rot your teeth with it, you were part of the empire. The everyday noblewoman, a day in the life of a black-toothed lady. You think being a noblewoman in Tudor England was all gowns and banquets. Again, if you wanted to keep up appearances, your day was a dental nightmare. Walking, you wake up to a mouth full of pain. Your teeth ache, your gums bleed, and your breath could knock out a horse. But you ignore it. Because in Tudor England, suffering was part of the job. Dough, breakfast, sugared wine, candied fruits, and marzipan. You nibble carefully, trying not to wince as the sugar eats away at your enamel. Your servants watch in awe, because if you can afford to eat like this every morning, you're truly elite. Midday, you touch up your teeth, a quick rub with soot or charcoal, and instantly your smile is caught ready. You avoid smiling too widely, because if people see too much white, they'll know you're faking it. Noon, you host a banquet. The table is laden with sugar sculptures, spiced wines, and honeyed meat. Your guests marvel at the display because if you can afford to waste sugar like this, you're somebody. Kinning, you rinse with wine or herbs because toothbrushes don't exist yet. You pray your teeth hold out for another day, and if one falls out, no problem. You'll just smile a little less tomorrow. And bedtime, you dab on a little more sugar paste just to keep the decay going. Because in Tudor England, a good night's sleep wasn't about rest, it was about maintaining your status. So the next time you complain about brushing your teeth, remember, in Tudor England, noblewomen would have killed for your problems. Because for them, a healthy smile wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. And if you wanted to fit in, you had to be willing to rot for it. The men's perspective. Did noblemen blacken their teeth too? You think only women were obsessed with blackened teeth in Tudor England. Kink again. The men were just as vain, they just had more options. For noblemen, rotting teeth were a sign of power, but they weren't as strict about it. A man could get away with a few white teeth and still be respected. But if he wanted to really flex, he'd let his smile decay just like the women. Henry VIII was famous for his sweet tooth, his terrible teeth. By the time he was king, his teeth were blackened, broken, and missing. And yet, no one dared to laugh. Because if the King of England had a mouthful of rot, then rot was royal. But here's the double standard. While noblewomen had to blacken their teeth to fit in, noblemen could choose. Some, like Sir Francis Drake, flaunted their decay as a sign of their wealth and adventures. Others, like Sir Walter Raleigh, kept their teeth as white as possible because they preferred the Spanish style. And the real irony? The men who didn't blacken their teeth were often judged less harshly than the women who didn't. Because in Tudor England, a man's worth wasn't tied to his smile but a woman's was. So while the noblemen of the court might have dabbled in dental decay, they weren't as committed as the women, because for them, a black smile was a choice. For the women, it was a necessity. The religious backlash. When the church condemned vanity, you think everyone in Tudor England was on board with the black teeth trend? Far from it. The church had opinions, and they weren't pretty. From the pulpit, priests railed against vanity. They condemned the wasteful use of sugar, the obsession with appearance, and the sinful pride of the nobility. A blackened smile wasn't just a status symbol, it was a moral failing. And the Puritans, they were even harsher. To them, rotting teeth were a sign of gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins. If you had a mouthful of decay, you were not just rich, you were sinful. But here's the real kicker. Even the clergy weren't immune. Some bishops and abbots had just as many cavities as the nobles they preached against. And if they dared to blacken their teeth, hypocrisy at its finest. And the worst part? The church condemnation didn't stop anyone. Because in Tudor England, fitting in at court was more important than fitting in with God. And if the Queen herself had a mouthful of rot, then rot was right. So the next time you hear a sermon on vanity, remember, in Tudor England, the church preached against black teeth, but the court practiced it anyway. Because when it came to status symbols, God took a back seat to the Queen. The medical consequences. How black teeth led to early deaths. You think a toothache is bad now. In Tudor England, it could kill you. Because here's the brutal truth. There was no dental care, no anesthesia, no fillings, no dentist. If you had a cavity, you suffered. And if the pain got too bad, you pulled the tooth out yourself. Or, if you were lucky, you had a barber surgeon do it for you without painkillers, without sterilization, and often without success. And the infection. What deadly. A simple cavity could turn into a raging abscess, filling your mouth with pus, agony, and the risk of blood poisoning. And if the infection spread to your brain or heart, you were dead. Because in Tudor England, a toothache wasn't just a nuisance, it was a death sentence. And let's not forget the smell. A mouthful of rotting teeth didn't just look bad, it smelled like a corpse. And yet, no one said a word. Because in Tudor England, bad breath was the price of prestige. And what about missing teeth? No problem. Some noblewomen embraced the gaps, seeing them as proof of a life well lived. Others tried rudimentary dentures made from ivory, bone, or even wood. But these false teeth were uncomfortable, unstable, and often worse than nothing. And if they fell out mid-conversation, a social disaster. And the worst part? There was no escape. Once your teeth started rotting, there was no going back. And if you lost them all, well, at least you died rich. So the next time you complain about a trip to the dentist, remember, in Tudor England, a toothache could kill you. And if you wanted to fit in at court, you had to be willing to risk your life for a black smile. The decline of the trend. When white teeth became fashionable again, the black teeth era didn't last forever. Fashions changed. And by the early 17th century, the Tudor obsession with decay was fading fast. It started with the Stuarts. When James I took the throne in 1603, he brought with him a new wave of continental influence. And in France and the Low Countries, white teeth were coming back in style. Suddenly, a clean, bright smile was the new status symbol. And the Puritans? They hated the excesses of the Tudor court. To them, blackened teeth were a sign of sinful indulgence. And as their influence grew, so did the backlash against dental decay. But the real turning point came with Charles I and his French queen, Henrietta Maria. She brought French fashions to England, including a preference for white teeth. And if the Queen of England wanted a clean smile, then clean was in. And then there was the rise of the middle class. The merchants and gentry who were building their fortunes didn't want to look like the old nobility. They wanted to look like the future. And the future? It had white teeth. So by the 1650s, the black teeth trend was on its way out. And by the 18th century, white teeth were the ultimate flex. Because in the New England, health was wealth. And if you wanted to fit in, you had to smile bright. The legacy. How Tudor vanity shaped modern beauty. You think the black teeth trend died with the Tudors? Think again. Its legacy lives on in ways you might not even realize. First, there's the obsession with sugar. The Tudors started a craze that never really ended. Today, we know sugar is bad for us, but we still can't get enough. Because once a luxury becomes a habit, it's hard to break. And then there's the idea of suffering for beauty. The Tudors proved that people will endure pain, discomfort, and even death to fit in. And today, we're still doing it. From high heels to Botox, we're still willing to suffer for status. And the status symbol. They've just evolved. Today, it's not black teethites, white veneers, straight smiles, and perfect teeth. But the obsession with dental perfection, that's pure Tudor. And the sugar industry, it's bigger than ever. And just like in Tudor times, it's built on exploitation, child labor, environmental destruction, and global inequality. Because some things never change. So the next time you brush your teeth, remember, the Tudors started it all. And their obsession with dental decay shaped the way we think about beauty today. Because vanity is eternal. And so is the price we pay for it. The portraits that lie, how artists hid the truth. You think the portraits of Tudor nobles show the whole truth? Think again. The artists were masters of deception and they knew how to hide the rot. Because here's the thing. No one wanted to be painted with a mouth full of blackened, missing teeth. So the artists got creative. They'd paint their subjects with closed lips or subtle shadows to hide the decay. And if they had to show teeth, they'd soften the blackness, making it look more like a trick of the light than actual rot. And the most famous example? Queen Elizabeth I herself. In her official portraits, she's always smiling with her lips closed or just barely open, showing only a hint of her decayed teeth. But in private sketches and later portraits, the truth is there. And it's not pretty. And the worst part? Everyone knew. The court knew. The public knew. But no one said a word. Because in Tudor England, the illusion was more important than the reality. And the real irony. Today, we still do the same thing. We Photoshop our smiles, filter our selfies, and hide our flawsole to fit in with the ideal. Because some things never change. And the Tudors were just the first to perfect the art of the lie. So the next time you see a Tudor portrait, remember, but you're not seeing the whole story. Because behind that closed-lipped smile, there's a mouthful of rot. And that's the real flex. The portraits that lie. How artists hid the truth. You think those elegant Tudor portraits with their serene smiles tell the whole story? Far from it. The artists of the time were masters of illusion, and their greatest trick was hiding the rot. Imagine this. You're a noblewoman at court, and your teeth are black, crumbling, and missing. But you can't let the world see that. So you hire a painter and you give him strict instructions. Paint me beautiful. Hide the decay. And for God's sake, don't show my teeth. And the artists obeyed. They painted lips closed, or just barely parted, showing only the faintest hint of a smile. They used shadows and highlights to disguise the blackness. And if they had to show teeth, they'd soften the edges, making them look less like rot and more like art. Take Queen Elizabeth. Is portraits, for example. In almost every official painting, her lips are tightly sealed, or her smile is just a faint, mysterious curve. But in private sketches and less flattering portraits, the truth is undeniable. Her teeth were a disaster, and yet no one dared to paint it. And the most famous trick? The Tudor pout. That slightly pursed, closed-lipped smile you see in so many portraits. That wasn't just a style, it was a necessity. Because if you opened your mouth too wide, the whole court would see the decay. And the real irony, everyone knew the truth. The nobles knew. The servants knew. By your well, the foreign ambassadors knew, but no one spoke of it. Because in Tudor England, the illusion of perfection was more important than the reality of decay. So the next time you admire a Tudor portrait, remember, you're not seeing the whole picture. Behind that serene, closed-lipped smile, there's a mouthful of pain, rot, and the price of prestige. And that, my friend, is the real masterpiece. The modern parallels. From black teeth to gold grills. You think the black teeth trend is long gone? Think again. It's just evolved. Today, we don't blacken our teeth to show off our wealth, but we still use our smiles as status symbols. And the more extreme, the better. Take gold grills, for example. In hip-hop culture, a mouth full of gold is the ultimate flex. It's expensive, flashy, and impossible to ignore, just like the blackened teeth of the Tudors. And just like in Tudor times, If you can afford to wear gold on your teeth, you're somebody. And what about veneers? Perfectly white, straight, and gleaming. They're the modern equivalent of the Tudor black smile. Because in today's world, a flawless smile isn't just about health, it's about money. And if you can afford to perfect your teeth, you're proving you've made it. And the sugar obsession? It's stronger than ever. We know it's bad for us, but we still can't resist. Because once a luxury becomes a habit, it's hard to break. And just like in Tudor times, we're still willing to sacrifice our health for a little sweetness. And the social pressure? It's just as real. Today, if you don't have a perfect smile, you're judged. And if you do, you're envied. Because in the 21st century, just like in the 16th, your teeth are a statement. And if you want to fit in, you'd better make sure yours say the right thing. So the next time you see someone with gold grills or veneers, remember, the Tudors started it all. And their obsession with dental status symbols lives on today. Because vanity is eternal. And so is the desire to flex. The archaeological proof. What skeletons tell us. You think the black teeth trend is just a myth. The skeletons don't lie. Archaeologists have dug up the remains of Tudor nobles, and the evidence is clear. Their teeth were a mess. Cavities, abscesses, and missing teeth were the norm among the elite. And the worst part? The damage was self-inflicted. Take Queen Elizabeth's teeth, for example. Historical records describe them as black, decayed, and even missing. And modern analysis of her portraits and personal effects confirms it. She ate so much sugar that her teeth couldn't handle it. And she wasn't alone. And the noblewomen of the court, their skeletons tell the same story. High sugar diets led to rampant tooth decay. And the lack of dental care meant that once a tooth started rotting, it was doomed. And the children, even they weren't spared. Sugar was a luxury, but it was also a curse. And the skeletons of noble children showed just as much decay as their parents. Because in Tudor England, if you were rich enough to eat sugar, you were rich enough to rot. And the real kicker? The skeletons of the poor tell a different story. Their teeth were better preserved because they couldn't afford sugar. And while the nobles were losing their teeth to decay, the peasants were keeping theirs intact. So the next time you hear about the black teeth trend, remember, the skeletons don't lie. And the Tudors paid the price for their obsession with sugar and status. Because in the end, the only thing left of their vanity is the rot. The ultimate flex. Why we still obsess over status symbols? You think the black teeth trend was just a bizarre fad? Think again. It's proof of a deeper human truth. We'll do anything to show off our status. From blackened teeth to gold grills. From corsets to Botox, humanity has always been willing to suffer for the sake of looking rich. And the Tudors were just the first to take it to the extreme. Because here's the real lesson of the black teeth trend. Status symbols aren't about logic. They're about power. They're about belonging. They're about proving you're part of the elite. And if that means rotting your teeth, breaking your ribs, or injecting toxins into your face, so be it. And the sugar obsession? It's just one example of how we'll destroy ourselves for the sake of status. Today, it's obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. In Tudor times, it was tooth decay and early death. But the underlying impulse is the same. We'll do whatever it takes to fit in. And the real irony? The Tudors thought they were so advanced. But in the end, they were just like us. Willing to suffer, willing to spend, and willing to destroy themselves all for the sake of looking good. So the next time you see someone with a perfect smile, a designer handbag, or a luxury car, remember, the Tudors started it all. And their obsession with status symbols is still alive and well today. Because some things never change. And the desire to flex is one of them.